Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel, and this YouTube channel is going to be about conspiracy theories. Now, I'm not saying any of these are real or fake, but they're left open for your interpretation and your enjoyment of these videos. Now, in today's video, we're going to be conspirizing about the Apollo 11 moon landing, the first ever landing on the moon. Now, this is a very interesting one. That's why this is my first video, and yeah, I mean, there's not really much else to say except for to get into the video. This is just a little intro, considering this is the first video on this channel. So if you do enjoy, leave a like, and I will try and upload these as quickly as possible. Although they take a lot of time, so you know, if you share them and stuff, I will definitely get them up quicker. So without further ado, let's get into the conspiracies.
16th of July 1969, and three men blast off for a journey that would make history. Within days, two of the three astronauts aboard Apollo 11 would become the first humans to walk on the surface of the moon.
Also, they thought it took 400,000 NASA employees and contractors to pull Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon in 1969, according to NASA, but only one man to spread the idea it was a hoax. His name was Bill Kaysing. It began as a hunch before turning into a true conviction that the US lacked the technical prowess to make it to the moon, or at least there and back. But before we get into the theories, we have to learn more about Bill Kaysing. Bill Kaysing was an American writer who claimed that the 6 Apollo moon landings between July 1969 and December 1972 were hoaxes. Kaysing served in the United States Navy during World War II as a midshipman, and later attended Navy Officers Training School and the University of Southern California. After the Navy and college, he worked briefly as a salesman, an insurance claims examiner, and a cabinet maker. And in this post-university pre-technical period, his writing carried involved publishing on a variety of subjects. Kaysing then found work as a technical writer at Rocketdyne's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a division of North American Aviation. In 1956, in the period prior to the development of the Apollo missions in September 1956, he became a surface analyst there. In 1958, a surface engineer, and in 1962, a publications analyst. From 1956 to 1963, Kaysing served as a head of technical publications from Rocketdyne. On May 31st, 1963, he resigned for personal reasons. In the years that followed, Kaysing had been described as suffering from chronic anxiety, which over time turned into full-blown delusion with modern life. Kaysing would come to assert in a new vein of writing that came to fruition in the mid-1970s. During his much earlier tenure at Rocketdyne, he saw documents pertaining to the Mercury, Gemini, Atlas, and Apollo programs, and that one did not need an engineering or science degree to determine that a hoax was being perpetrated. Rocketdyne scientists with whom he worked with expressed to him that there was enough technology at the time to perhaps send a crewed rocket to the moon, but not enough technology developed to return safely to Earth. They also spoke of the very real problem of traveling through atmospheric radiation without harm to the astronauts as a problem that yet needed to be solved. Even before July 1969, he had a hunch, an intuition, a true conviction, and decided that he did not believe that anyone was going to the moon. In his book, Kaysing introduced arguments which he said proved the moon landings were faked. Let's get into the theories. I've chosen the most compelling theories from Bill Kaysing from best to worst, so let's get into them. Number 1. The absence of stars in lunar surface photographs was indicative of a hoax. The Apollo astronauts' photos were exposed for the brightly sunlit lunar surface and white spacesuits. These exposures were too short to detect stars in the sky. Space cameras can permit a very wide range of exposure settings. New Horizons' LORRite camera, for instance, can shoot images with exposures as short as 1 millisecond and as long as 30 seconds. They used the shortest exposure setting when they were flying past Jupiter, which is much closer to the Sun and much brighter than Pluto. They used the longest exposures for the faintest targets, distant worlds in the Kuiper Belt. Theory number 1 has already been disproved, as you could tell. But the other two theories are where you could really get on Bill Kaysing's side. Theory number 2 is the death of Thomas Barron. Thomas Ronald Barron was a safety and quality inspector who worked at the Kennedy Space Center from September 1965 to November 1966. He reported to his superiors many acts of worker negligence, poor workmanship, and disregard for safety rules. His reports, however, were not based on direct observation, but on second-hand notes from other people, and this caused them to be taken lightly. He submitted some of his remarks to NASA at the end of 1966 in a 55-page report. Some of his warnings were heeded, while others were considered groundless. Barron felt disregarded and sidelined, and so leaked his criticism directly to the press. This decision led North American Activision, the manufacturer of the Apollo Common Modulars, to fire him in January 1967. Barron began to draft on his own a more detailed 500-page report. After the Apollo 1 fire, which took the lives of Grimson, White, and Chafe, on January 27, 1967, Barron delivered this report to the committees of the US Congress that were investigating the disaster. On April 21, 1967, testified before a subcommittee governed by Congressman Olin Teague. 1 week after testifying, Barron and his family were killed when their car was struck by a train at a level crossing. His full-length report was never made public and has never been seen. If the facts are told in this way, they certainly lend themselves to a conspiracy theory. Barron was killed to silence him and make sure that nobody found out that the Apollo project was in deep trouble or was a sham. However, this theory clashes with a basic logic flaw. Barron died after he talked to the press, after delivering his extended report to Congress, after testifying before the Commission subcommittee, and after the very serious problem in the design of the Apollo command module had become public in the most tragic and inescapable way, with the death of 3 astronauts. Silencing Barron at this point would have been absolutely useless. Moreover, while the nature of the accident that killed Barron and his family might seem freakish and suspicious at first glance, if you consider the logistics of the coordinating a train to pass at the exact time when Barron's car is passing and make sure Barron can't see it and avoid being struck, it seems an absurdly complicated way to go about eliminating an embarrassing witness. What happened to the 500-page report is unclear. The transcripts of Barron's testimony, which are publicly available, indicate that the report was discussed and that the Congress committee was reluctant to include it as an official record because its size made it awkward and costly to duplicate and print it, especially if the report included her say, which would have been legally inadmissible anyway. NASA and North American Activision, the organizations that had most to lose from its publication, never had the opportunity to destroy it. Since Barron gave it directly to the congressman, it is unknown whether the report was returned to Barron or simply discarded. Either way, it mattered little whether the report was saved or not. NASA and especially North American Activision were already in the spotlight for the Apollo 1 disaster, and their omissions had already been made public. Barron's report would have made no difference before the coffins of Grimson, Chafe, and White. Perhaps the most compelling theory from Bill Kaysing is the 10 deaths which could have been cover-ups. Between 1964 and 1967, a total of 10 astronauts lost their lives in freak accidents. These deaths accounted for an astonishing 15% of NASA's astronaut corps. Bill Kaysing then adds that to keep something that's a lie wrapped up and covered over, you've got to eliminate all the people that can talk about it. The implication is that these freak accidents were staged to keep under wraps the secret that the Apollo missions would be faked. Conspiracy theories here are no longer talking about doctored photographs, they're openly making accusations of murder. The allegedly suspicious deaths two involved military astronauts Michael James Adams and Robert Henry Lewis, who had nothing to do with the Apollo project. 4. Charles Bazzelt, Elliot C., Theodore Freeman, and Clifton Williams occurred in 3 accidents with T-38 supersonic training jets that were test pilots. 1. Ed Givens was the result of a car crash, and Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chafe died in the Apollo 1 fire. 10 deaths over 3 years was sadly par for the course in the high-risk world of test pilots in those days. As Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff mercilessly recounts, so statistically there's nothing particularly suspicious about these events. What is suspicious instead is that the Fox TV lists includes 2 people who were not part of the Apollo project. It's easy to create an atmosphere of mystery if you inflate the number of deaths by 25%. Although I would definitely say, in my opinion, the third theory is definitely the most believable, because it will never be proved by NASA or any of the committees that these were cover-ups or not. So in conclusion, the facts aren't with Kaysing, as simple logic can destroy his theories. Although some of his points can definitely be taken serious, it's hard to think we will ever get a response from NASA. Well, there you have it, guys. That was Bill Kaysing's theories about Apollo 11, the moon landing, the first ever, being fake. Now, obviously simple logic goes against most of what he's saying, but the government back then, we all know about the Roswell. I'm sure I'll make a video on the Roswell crash. The government, they definitely, they were a bit sketchy, so cover-ups were definitely a thing. The third theory, you know, that many astronauts dying, I'm sure at least one of them had to be a cover-up from NASA or one of their governing bodies. But I doubt we'll ever find out, because why would NASA go ahead and tell us what happened in 1969 in 2020? It's just not going to happen. But there you have it, guys. Thanks for watching. It'd definitely be appreciated if you liked the video, subscribe, because this stuff, it takes a long time to research, get all the necessary clips and all that stuff. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you guys on another conspiracy video. Peace.